Hi, Rory.
Hi Louis, can you hear me and everything?
Yeah, good. Thanks, mate. Yep.
Good. Glad to finally get hold of you. It's been it's been a while. Been busy.
Yeah, it's been rather hectic, but as is the case when you juggle a lot of things, so you just have to get on with it, I'm afraid.
So where are you now? Are you on pre-season or something?
Yeah, just down with EC. We're in Devon, and kind of taking on a consultancy role with them to support analysis and sports science. So I do a couple of sessions. I support staff members, and there's a few students from Chichester here as well. So fingers crossed it works out well. I support the staff and some of the things that they do, GPS data collection and so on. So all stuff that I've sort of fairly comfortable with. So yeah, and in between that, I've obviously marking, externally grading, dissertations, and you name it, as I'm sure
Yeah.
you're you're
Yeah,
really,
yeah, yeah. No, yeah.
you know.
Thanks for finding time. Like I appreciate you're busy. So
Right.
yeah, I guess we'll sort of get started. Obviously, I sort of found you via your organization, the Football Family. If you wouldn't mind just telling me a bit about your experience in the game and what the Football Family is basically.
Well, the Football Family kind of generated from the fact that myself and my colleague at the time, Adam Wild, we were non-league football managers, and we had a few young pros on loan from us from local professional clubs, and we noticed a sort of a deterioration in their character, demeanor, performances. Not attitude, never question their attitude, just in terms of their outlook and in terms of their communication skills. It just took a dip at a certain point in time. They arrived excellent, then they dipped, and we knew that the decision time is crucial for scholars, and that was the point in case for some of the young lads that we had. So we just thought, how do we help this? How do we create something that supports what they're going through and allows them still to flourish and in a non-league environment as opposed to the pro environment, just in case that decision is a rejection and it is a career termination at that point, at that club. Can we then instill the love of the game or at least instill some challenges and some processes to help these players move on and build their confidence and self-esteem? And so on. And it also, look, this is a 20-year lived experience for myself and Adam, and for the players that we incorporated into the mentoring scheme. I've been at Crystal Palace, I've been at Southampton, Bournemouth, Portsmouth, and it's a difficult time to decide who gets a contract and who doesn't. It's a difficult time to decide who may have potential, who may not. We're not talking on, specific benchmarks that will and indicators of potential performance. They're not clear cut. They're grey, and it does come down to opinion, and it does come down to an educated opinion, but an opinion nonetheless. And it's an opinion that you'll put your side of the story across and your belief in that player's physical, technical, psychological factors, and so on. And as part of the team at Crystal Palace, I was new to it, and I was a young practitioner, didn't have the skill set to necessarily understand it at the time. I certainly saw differences in the youngsters. I saw differences in the staff in the weeks leading and the weeks post players being deselected. That was very difficult because you're saying goodbye to lots of players, and you don't really know how to act and behave around them in that short period of time from when they're being released. So it's anxious. I think everybody's anxious around that time, from the cook to the kit man, to the head coach of the academy, to the manager of the first team. It doesn't matter who you are. It's an anxious time, and you're hoping that you're able to deliver good news to the majority, but we know there'll be some bad news for others. So that's kind of where it emanated from, and we thought, how do we do this? So we literally sat down and went, how do we ensure that these players that are coming to us, we can identify them quickly and we can help them quickly? And for me, it was a bit of a brainwave. We just thought, well, they're not going to listen to some two old fuddy-duddies. young players aren't, unless you have an esteemed reputation in a sport, or you have a longevity with that person and you've built up a rapport, they're not going to listen to you. So we thought they would listen to players because they're of similar age, and these players have gone through those experiences. So we brought in Jack Stevens and Sam McQueen for an initial discussion around this, and they were all in. From their perspective, it was, we can mentor and help this, we can talk, we can invest our time into these players, and hopefully, they'll listen, and hopefully they'll build build some kind of rapport, so that they're not left on their own, they're not isolated. Because at the time, that's what we were finding, 5-6 years ago, when this really snowballed, different academies were approaching it in a different way, and some weren't approaching it in a very good way. Unfortunately, that there wasn't the contact post deselection, there wasn't the considered approach, there wasn't the support mechanisms in place. You kind of went, and we all hoped that you went on to pastures new and did well, and that's obviously not the case for many of them, because football clubs are fantastic in supporting the player while they're there. Once they're gone, that wasn't necessarily the case. But the caveat to as it's got much better, Rory. Yeah. It's got exponentially better. Can it still improve? Yes, but it's got exponentially better. But at the time, it wasn't there, and the players filled that void for us. They delivered, a sounding board. They delivered a shoulder if necessarily, if they needed to lean on them, and they just invested some time into these young lads, and it worked at a level of, we could see there was a difference. We could see that these players were being spoken to in certain positions. So in our naivety, we went, well, you're a defender and you're a defender, so why not get you two guys together and discuss it? And I remember Jack's first meeting with Connor and talking about defending and positioning, and then they came to watch them play in a non-league game just up the road at Tottenham, and invested a bit of time in. And if you can imagine, as a youngster that's been released or about to be released from a football club, if another football club turn up and another professional player from another football club turn up and invest time in watching you and talking to you afterwards, it does help to repair that initial dent in their confidence and self-esteem. And I think that's sometimes all that's needed for them to then kick on and find another avenue. So rather long-winded response, but kind of that's where it came from.
No, that's good. So I think we'll get on to sort of how far it's come in the past sort of few years and stuff. But when you pick these players up, was the aim to get them back playing? Was it, or maybe show them another route in coaching? And do you think at the times were clubs sort of what you mentioned, they took good care of them while they were in-house and while they were playing? Did they let players know about potentially other avenues in the game should they get released, or was it all, you're going to be a player for us, and if you're not, well, we're not too bothered?
It's I don't want to typecast all clubs with the same approach and the same brush, but generally there are a couple of avenues that football clubs pitch onto the players, and they still do now. It's a scholarship scheme or the Erasmus scheme, so they can either go to Sweden or they can go out to the States to play, to continue that playing element and pursue some form of education. And the other way is to exit trial, and the other option generally is to go into non-league. They're the three real avenues. And if you're going into non-league, it's with the idea of finding alternate employment and a career pathway, and still getting your football fix, and at a level that there is a chance to go through. Everybody uses the Jamie Vardy as an example. Yes, there are loads now that come through, but they're few and far between. Yes, it's a great story, but for me, the stories that work and the stories that should be celebrated are those that have continued a footballing career in non-league and pursued doctorates or pursued engineering or pursued another passion and found another passion. And that's kind of where we were at. It wasn't about suggesting that this is a second chance in football. That kind of wasn't our remit. It wasn't where we were looking at. It was more support the boy, support the aspirations of still wanting to play football, still hoping there's a chance to maybe progress in the game through the levels, but helping to support a non-league program as opposed to a professional program, and adding on ideas in where they could move with their careers, in terms of finding another passion and throwing all their effort into that. But it takes time. Each individual is entirely different. Some are comfortable with moving on to a new career path, some aren't. Some take trial and error. I remember as a young man, I took trial and error to get where I needed to get to. You try certain things and it's entirely fluid. It's not linear. It could go in any direction. But to answer your question, for us, it's not about continuing as a football per se. That's not at the forefront of our mind. It's finding the love for the game again, building confidence as a person, and nurturing those soft skills that they might not necessarily know they have. So the transferable skills that academies teach them fantastically well. But often you get a player that doesn't quite understand just yet what skill sets they've got. Can they operate very well in a team? Yes, they can. Can they lead? Can they communicate verbally and written? Yes, they can. Do they know about their body in terms of looking after it and looking after their lifestyle? Absolutely, because they've done it from day dot. So there are lots of really good transferable skills that these young lads have, and it's where that can then go to position them to go and apply for other avenues of work.
Okay, so when these boys do come to you, firstly, sort of how many do? Because I think perhaps an issue is that a lot of players wouldn't sort of actually seek help or seek a bit of guidance after being let go because they might be so upset or whatever. And also, what is the sort of main overriding emotion you think most of them are feeling at that point? Is it sort of serious sort of I guess depression and rejection, or is it more feeling of a bit of lost and needing some direction?
I think they're different, but I can, hand on heart, I can tell you that the majority that I've experienced are sad. They're disappointed. There's this idea of failure, which shouldn't be the case for me. I mean, they've been so successful up until 18, 19 years of age. They've been the best locally in terms of what they do, in terms of potential and talent. They still have that potential and talent. They're still gifted footballers at the end of the day. They're just not able to get into those very, 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 very few situations where you're going to get a professional contract. But they are still excellent athletes and excellent footballers. So the idea of failure is something we address early on, because they haven't failed. They've actually transitioned through the ages very, very well, and they've been successful with what they do. So for me, it's sad and failure and upsetting others. And then, that of letting people down is a big thing. Lots of research and our own research found that identity is an issue. You were a footballer, you're no longer a footballer. All through school ages, you've been known as the footballer of the group or of the school, and there's generally only a few in that group. And of course, as a youngster, you get identity, you get given kit. Your numbers are on it, and that's you. The badge is part of you. You become part of the culture, part of the football club, and everything it stands for. And then it's removed. So that's the issue I think most face is, how do I now belong to somewhere different? And what is somewhere different for me? What does that entail? And that's where non-league football clubs for me are really, really important. They're important that they provide some of the similar things or thoughts and feelings that a pro club would. And we're able to do that in many non-league clubs. The lower you go, the more difficult it is, of course. But some non-league football clubs these days are actually run really, really professionally. They have expert coaches. They have real good qualified people. They have consultants on board. They have sports scientists. They have S&C coaches. They have kit men. So if you can find the right environment and you can encourage that similar programs and pathways within a pro club, the transition's actually a lot easier than people would think. Yes, it takes time to get used to the different daily activities, but then that's the same for any change in job. It takes time to learn the new methods and the new approaches, and certainly the different landscape. But you can get there, and I think it's important that you want to belong somewhere. They definitely want to belong somewhere, so being able to provide that is key. So for me, you know, professional football clubs have done so much within their own bubble. It's now supporting them outside of that bubble.
Yeah. Do you think you mentioned sort of the main emotions being sort of, I don't know, failure or a loss of identity. Does this perhaps come from being in that bubble for too long? Do you think maybe there's an issue of when they're in the academy, there's perhaps not enough awareness of the outside world or the percentages and stuff? Do you think because I think if you get, I imagine it's kind of the same with anything. If you not achieve what you set out to, you're going to sort of feel that. But do you think that they're told they're a footballer maybe from too young, and there needs to be a bit more of a you're not there yet, or maybe clubs are already doing that?
Look, for me, I think that language is changing and changing for the better. I think in me personally, you know, from 5 years to now, the language has changed drastically. And it's not all about football. It's about nurturing the person, and it's about enriching their journey through football. And it's not all about football, which it has to be. There's still a lot to do, but I mean, I think, you know, young age groups now, there's lots of change in terms of the EPPP, and it's factoring into this. Change obviously takes time. There's a number of processes and procedures you have to go through before you can implement change in any organization, and especially anything over a football sort of national governing body. It does take time to implement across, but they are, you know, there's a change now in terms of youngsters. I think it's under the age of 9. I may be wrong. The pre-academy groups won't have the official kit anymore. Mm-hmm. So they'll have a kit, but it won't be, you know, the Man City kit, for argument's sake, which I think is a good thing. I think it makes perfect sense. You know, you're not a professional footballer at 9, as we all know. So why fall into the trappings of identity and culture there, and all the things that could persuade a young mind that they are going to be a footballer. Now, we don't want to take the dream away from people, because ultimately you need to work hard, and you need to be rigid in what you do to achieve. You know, you don't just fall into being a footballer, and the competition is so high that you do have to give your all. But there's no reason why a football club have to emblaze that on every wall in every building. Hard work beats talent when talent doesn't work hard, and so on and so forth. You know, there's too much emphasis on giving everything to football, and we do encourage that through our language, through our communication, through our examples. But I think that's changing, and I think that's changing because people understand that childhood and adolescence is fraught with issues anyway, let alone the additional pressure you get from football. And I think, you know, player liaison officers and player care and academy directors that are understanding the nuances of behavioural and adaptation to different stimuli. You know, you look at around now, and they certainly are a different model. And I'm not saying what was happened in the past was too archaic and too regimented. But what you get now is a flexibility through funding, through facilities, through additional staff, through additional expertise around trying to be safe and trying to provide something different other than football. I think that's where I'm at with that. It's gone round about the houses, but try not to step on anybody's toes, because there was some great work done in academy football. And on the flip side, some players actually that released are relieved. You know, it's not all, they don't, everybody doesn't come out tarnished. Everybody doesn't come out with issues. Everybody doesn't come out with some negativity. Some footballers or some young footballers at that age group, they leave slightly relieved, slightly understanding their own position, which is another great transferable skill. They understand, they're aware of their abilities. They're aware of where they stand in terms of that football club and the competitiveness around it. So some are relieved, some look for a new challenge, some find it, which is great at a different level. And some want to pursue something different because they've had 18 years or at least, let's say, maybe 12, 13 years of regimented football training, and some are relieved to sort of step away from that and go and pursue another career. and still play football at a less strenuous, a less committal way.
Yeah, I think as you're outlining, there's been a lot of change in the game, but I think as an outsider who hasn't got bar a spell with Wimbledon's under nines, hasn't got much experience with academy football, the narrative, I guess, in the media and the press has kind of been the same. It's been sort of, you hear these pretty horrible stories about someone that gets released, and I think the story of Jeremy Winston was one which I think a lot of people took notice of. Do you think there's been enough reporting, and do you think the outside world is looks on academies fairly, or do you think it's been too negative stuff, horror stories, that selling dreams, crushing dreams, etc., etc.? Because if you look at sort of the articles written in that field, it's pretty much been the same headline for about 10 years.
Yep. Yeah, I do. I think look, I have wrote those stories in the past, but the stories have actually been celebrating the achievements of someone that has been knocked back, has undergone some tough times, and the story is in how they've adapted and coped and changed and moved on. So there's some learned material there to help people. You're talking about this is a disillusioned, disingenuous population that get released. They're going to have some negatives, but it takes time for them to understand the rationale and the reasoning behind why they didn't get taken on. But within that, there are ways in which to approach it. And if a football club hasn't approached it in the right way, well, then it has to be told. The story has to be what it is. And I'm well aware of those horror stories. I know full well, I was stood in the corridor when a player walked past that corridor. We're talking 8 or 9 years ago. A player walked in the corridor, a young 18-year-old, and the coach just pulled him in my earshot and just said, look, if you can get yourself fixed up, get yourself fixed up. And I mean, that's no way of delivering a deselection type word or communication. I dare say in context, there were probably discussions prior to that, but for that child, that's an image and a conversation that won't leave them, because it's the final nail in the coffin, and literally at that football club, I should say. But it literally, those are the things that we remember. And those are the things we visualize through disappointment. So the method and the communication can and should be better. And my belief is that if you get an under 18 or an under 19 that is entirely shocked by the decision, then something's been wrong in the process. Nobody should be shocked, upset, and like, okay, kind of saw this coming. That's the approach that I feel that should be there. If they're shocked, then the review process hasn't happened right. The communication hasn't happened right. But for me, we need to spin the narrative and actually show the good things that the academies do. And there are some wonderful experiences, some life enriching experiences that aren't shared. They are starting to come through now. And the cynic in me thinks they're coming through to show that their academy is the better academy to select than the 100, or even, in some cases, the satellite centers are maybe 1,000 meters away. But certainly, to beat your neighbor, sometimes you've got to show how good your academy is. But that's okay, because those again are the positives. And if the players are coming out and the parents are coming out with good vibe stories and good experiences, then why not share them? Because for every sad story, there's probably 50 good examples of some great experiences that they would never get if it wasn't for being involved in football, and their skills. Don't forget their skills and their experiences. So unfortunately, it's too easy to jump on the negative stories. But the tragic instance with Jeremy is one that really did kickstart and help get this conversation in front of the people that I needed to get in front of. So how, it's entirely tragic, and my thoughts go out to his friends and family, but, it's probably a case that has pushed people to act. And they continue to act, which is really good. You know, that the voice is getting larger, it's getting noisier. You know, you look at Crystal Palace, and you know, I was responsible for sort of leaking that unofficially through the football family when we told the story, and Gary Issett gave his view on hopefully what Crystal Palace were going to do in terms of their 3-year aftercare provision. Now, academies were doing aftercare provision, but they hadn't told anybody. So now when that came out, obviously Crystal Palace then on the back of it, because it went viral over social media, they came out, and Steve Parish, the chairman, made a wonderful declaration and explained the processes and the reasons why they're doing it. And it made other people stand up and go, wow, we're not doing it, we should. Or in fact, we are doing it, we've just not told anyone. Well, good practice is always shared. Good practice around health, well-being, it should always be shared. Yes, you keep your coaching notebook and your drills and the way in which you make people physically fit. You know, you can keep those blueprints can be yours. But when it comes to supporting and helping good practice around developing a child and ensuring they remain safe, and ensuring that they remain in good health, and in a well-being state, then these should be shared, and they should be supportive of each other. Football clubs now don't become individual, they become a collective. So can Liverpool share some of their practices to help Portsmouth in League One? Absolutely they can. And it may be different in terms of the delivery because of the funding or whatever, but they can help, and they should help. And I think that's where football's coming together now. The PFA are starting to instigate changes or support changes. That the Premier League are looking to make changes in the EPPP. That's been looked into, and that's starting to come to fruition now. Every football club is going to have a funding pot delivered by the Premier League of £39,000, I believe, per year to support the player aftercare at that PDP phase, which is fantastic because some clubs can afford it, some clubs can't. And if they can't, then now there's a funding pot for it. How clubs utilize that, they're probably sat around, some of them thinking, I'm not quite sure how to do it. That's where the guys that have been doing it for some time, the Southamptons, the Liverpools, the Man Uniteds of the world, that have been preaching and putting this into place for the last decade, can help and support. And I think they're getting there. It's just, this is the growth area in football. It's like what performance analysis was in the late 1990s. It's slowly making its way in, and there are going to be some issues and some hiccups along the way, but there's a drive now, and there's an energy to do it, which is really good.
Yeah, I think so. We're sort of mentioning stuff like aftercare, player care and stuff. I was just sort of about to ask you, like, obviously these are great initiatives, and it's really, really good that football's making these changes, but with them being so new, are there some issues with them, and where do you think it's going to go in the next 5 years, and how do you think clubs should get there, or is it already perfect?
It's not perfect, no. Definitely not. I mean, in order for something to happen, and in order for something to us to assess its impact, it has to be over a certain amount of time. So for me, there has to be a practice or a procedure that starts now, and we track it over time, longitudinal, to say this is working, this isn't working. And that should be done from an independent factor, I believe. Doesn't necessarily have to be done club driven. There should be an independent body that looks at the aftercare provision. There'll be some great individuals within football clubs, and they'll all be slightly different. Their backgrounds will be slightly different, because at the moment, for me, nobody can tell me what a good player care officer is or a good aftercare player officer is. We don't know that yet. We don't even know what qualifications are best suited for that. It touches so many different areas. To be really good at it, you must understand the person. So the child, you need to understand them. You need to understand their parents and their influences. You need to understand where they want to get to. You need to be able to liaise with the coaches. You need to understand what football's about, and you know, in terms of the competitive environment. You must be able to talk football as well with the child. That's my belief. So you've got to be ingrained in it. You must also have an understanding of education and pedagogy, counseling, psychology. I mean, there's a whole raft of experiences. You then must look at the softer skills and be empathetic. You must be able to listen. You must be able to act. You must be able to solve. You must have autonomy within a football club to make changes in terms of approach or outlook, or even funding. You know, you've got to be a budget holder to be able to go and do things. So there's so many things that you need to be within that role, and that's going to evolve over time. I 100% hand on heart don't believe that anybody knows yet or can tell me what a player care officer should look like, or an aftercare player officer should look like. And that'll be interesting how that manifests itself and how that evolves. What they're doing will be interesting to see, because it'll be different. You know, how many times do you need to talk? What is the process to stay in touch? What is the process to support post care? How do they signpost? How, you know, what is the connectivity, the network that they have? You know, if I've got someone who's presenting with suicidal tendencies, do I feel that I'm the best person to deal with that? No. So should I signpost them to somewhere? Yes. But who is that, and how do they get in a room together? So there are loads of things in which will be tested and will be tried and tested, which they'll go through. There'll also be things like, you know, if we take a category 1 academy, for example, there may be at age 18, there may only be 50% of them may get taken on to the 23s, which is kind of generic. 40 to 50% get taken on for that additional year's development. 50% will then go. Let's just go 50-50 split. So you're talking of a squad of 16, maybe. Let's just say that 8 and 8. So 8 have gone, 8 have stayed. So you're looking at 8 to look after in that 1 year. Of that 8 in that category 1, it's probable that at least 50% will get a trial and a deal at another academy, category 2, category 3, category 4. So their journey in football will continue. It just won't continue at that club. So now we're looking at maybe 4. Within that 4, it might be that 2 able to go on a trial and get somewhere. They may go to America, they may go here. So you may only be dealing with 2 that haven't been able to find something, that haven't been able to get moving, that haven't been able to find a new passion and a new beginning. So now you can work very, very structured around 2 individuals. So you can do some really quality work. And of course, that'll evolve as you move on through the years. So at the outset, there'll only be 2. The following year, there might be 4, there might be 6, there might be 8. And then it'll be cumulative. That's when it'll get, that for me is when it will become it'll become interesting to see how the department evolves, because I think it will. But right now, putting in money to at least provide a person of qualification and a person of contact within that football club is a start point, and a title is a start point. That's a start point, and I think it'll evolve, like I say. So there's so much to work on here, and you know, it'll be interesting, like I said, to see how this evolves, who will become responsible for it within the club, what independent body's going to be auditing it, I suppose, because the EPPP is audited, isn't it? So it'll be interesting to see who picks that up. And I dare say this is all something that's already in the background, and it's already something that's being approached, and possibly already something that's been facilitated, and we're just unaware of it just yet.
Right. So final bit, because you know, I know you're a busy guy. So we've spoken a lot about what the clubs can do and what the people within the clubs can do. Is there perhaps something on the players to maybe take up this new care and stuff? Do you think perhaps players are reluctant when they're let go to sort of seek this stuff out? Do you think that maybe there's a danger of, because I think men in general are pretty bad at dealing with sort of sensitive issues, maybe they sort of fold into themselves a bit when they should be reaching out to this new and pretty good new care and stuff?
I think so, but it's difficult to put ownership on the player. But yes, there is. What you need is the connection, and sometimes what you need, if you're feeling low and you don't want to connect, is someone to do it for you. And that's just how it is these times. When you're having issues around your mental health, you're obviously clearly not thinking in a constructive, logical way, which they would have before. So there has to be an intervention. There has to be someone willing to make that and take that step. There are players, and they're celebrated for it, and they should be. That you know, I recently, an ex-player, Stephen Reed, who's now a coach, has made the decision to leave a fantastic job at Notts Forest. He's done wonders. The chap's done wonders to support that and leave a footballing career, then go into a coaching career and had some success. And he's decided to leave and been open with his reasons as to why he wants to leave, which is great, because what it offers is a platform for others to voice their opinion and voice their thoughts and feelings, and that's all it is. We have to be open, and in this environment, because it is testosterone driven, because it is, you know, you can't show a weakness in certain areas when you're playing because your contract might depend on it, or your progression might depend on it, or your standing within your peer group might depend on it. It's difficult to show weakness, and it's not weakness, it's support you need and help. So as long as football clubs are able to deliver that in a confidential way, which a lot of them are, you know, there are psychologists, there are support, there's mine, consultants and so on, and that help and support that on a level that we don't really talk about, because it is, again, something that is within the club and stays within the club. But you can't put the ownership on players, because it just wouldn't be right to expect someone to shout out for help. It's not a Samaritan's phone line approach. It has to be more of a connection between that player liaison officer, a coach, because coaches used to do it. We used to be the guys and girls that were the connection with the player. So we used to act as the psychologist and the support mechanism. It's different now. There are more people in this holistic approach, and so it should be more specialist people. So that's why I think, going back to another point, that the player care officer, or the aftercare player care officer, whatever you want to call them, has to be somebody that is fixed within that football club, has to be someone that's ingrained within that football club, that knows the players, knows their family, their history, their influences, knows the personality of the player, to be able to see and witness a change in that character or a change in that behavior, because they're all red flags as to maybe there's something wrong. And of course, players are good at masking it. Men are good at masking their difficulties. Females are good at masking their difficulties and their pressures. And often we encourage that. Don't show weakness. You're not hurt. Get up. Run it off. You'll be fine. Come on, breathe. Go through the pain barrier, because we are trying to get players to go through difficult moments so that they can succeed in the game and succeed in football. And as a team, you push them to the edge. You test your body, but ultimately, I don't think it's viable to continue to ask players to do more than necessarily they are. I think that the process have to come, because ultimately they're young. We are experienced. We are the educators. It should really fall on us to be able to instigate that channel of communication.
Okay, that's great. I think that's all we've got time for. Thanks. You've been really insightful, really interesting, really helped with my sort of overall understanding of the project. So thank you for taking time out and talking to me. Really appreciate it.
No worries. Listen, Rory, thank you for keep badgering me. You've been an excellent.
I'll be out your Twitter DMs now, so I'm sure you'll appreciate that.
No worries. And a diligent reporter, no less. Good luck with everything. I hope it goes well.
Thank you, mate. Cheers.
All the best.
Good luck.
Take care.
Bye.